Hello and welcome to Better Tech. I'm Sophia Moshasha, your host, and it's a privilege to be your new host today as we embark on a journey through the dynamic world of immersive and emerging technologies. My background in advancing XR and its applications across various sectors positions me to offer unique insights and perspectives. My career has been characterized by significant roles that have fostered education and engagement within this rapidly technological landscape. At Better Tech, our mission is to forge connections with leading minds in the industry and to delve deeply into the trends that are shaping our technological future. I'm pleased to welcome today Walt Carter, who has led digital transformation strategies for the financial sector. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you, Walt, about the innovative solutions that you've implemented. So welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today, Sophia. Looking forward to the
Thank you.
conversation.
You as well. Before we dive into our conversation about resilient IT infrastructure and financial services, could you give us a brief overview of your journey leading up to where you are today and kind of what led you to the financial sector?
So, probably a bunch of happy accidents, to be honest with you. I, long time ago, started building applications for application in the world of physics. So doing statistical analysis programming for physics experiments back in the very early 80s. I built a computer simulation of a nuclear particle accelerator on a VAX for my undergraduate thesis in physics. And then I went to work in the military. I was a captain in the Air Force when I got out, but I spent 4 years working on nuclear missiles. So I'm a card-carrying rocket scientist that's actually worked on real rockets. And I spent 3 years working in command and control, basically playing World War III games with the President and National Command Authority here in the U.S. Spent about a year up in Canadian NORAD headquarters, and all of those jobs were very focused around emerging technologies, per our conversation today. So I may want to come back and talk a little bit more about those. But when I got out of the Air Force in '92, I went back into what you and I would know as, traditional, telecom and IT services for big companies like Fidelity and Gannett and TRW, and then a few years ago, I found myself, with an offer to be a CIO at a mortgage company, having never been in the mortgage business. But the people that were there knew me pretty well and said, "Oh yeah, you'll be great at this, Walt." So I spent 3 years at the first company, and then they sold it, and then I got another job as a chief information officer and chief marketing officer at a second mortgage company. Grew that pretty rapidly. We sold it again very successfully. Tried to retire at the end of that, and found out I don't really do retirement well. And so, then I went to Homestar, where I've been for almost 6 years, and I just recently left Homestar, and technically retired again today as we speak, although it doesn't feel like it. So I was there for almost 6 years, and had a really good run. When I think about the challenges that we have in financial services and financial fintech in general, I think one of the things that you shared earlier in our warm up conversation is so true. Technology really is at the center of almost everything we do in business, and I have said for years as a CIO and CMO that everything that you try to do on the edge of the business has actually got some root in what we do in the technology stack, and depending on how important that is to you, you need to have that resiliency. That we talk about high availability. We've been talking about high availability for years. I've worked for 3 different CEOs now in the mortgage space that all said, "Look, I don't want to be in the technology business. Well, I want to be in the mortgage business." And I'm like, "Well, what does it mean to be in the mortgage business today without the technology to support that? Can you still do it the old school way with just paper and a pencil?" And the answer is no, you really can't. You can't do it in a secure and reliable way. You can't do it in a customer, service excellence kind of way without the technology. And and again, yeah, everybody's walking around carrying these little handheld devices, these supercomputers, and the expectations have changed dramatically. Right? If you tell people to fill out forms, I'll tell you the worst experience. Go to the doctor. Go to the doctor's office after you've already filled out all the forms online. They hand you the clipboard and ask you to fill out the same forms again. You do it because you're a good person and you're a nice person, and then you go sit down in the little office or the room, the holding room, and what do? They ask you the same questions again. And they fill out their forms, right? Like, look, I've already filled out these forms twice, and now you're filling them out. Some of those forms, by the way, ask you to give the same information multiple times on the same page. The mortgage industry, by the way, is not unlike that, right? We collect lots and lots of documents from you to get a mortgage. We verify your income, your employment, we look at the tax returns, we take pictures of your driver's license, your social security card, right? So we got all of this stuff, and we use it. Do we? Because I can actually now go to the IRS and get your tax returns. You don't have to give them to me. I can go to your payroll provider and I get your W-2s. You don't have to give them to me. And as we have found out that we could go to the direct source for that information, our opportunity for our customers to be involved in fraud goes way down. And so our industry calls that day one certainty, by the way. And it says, so for the big insurers of mortgages, like Freddie and Fannie and Jenny, the VA, all of those are insurance providers. They back the mortgages. They say, well, look, if you go direct to the source without having to get that information from the customer, which gives them an opportunity to massage that data, then we'll give you day one certainty for insuring that file. Yay, right? So in the future, I think what we're going to see is you push the button when you fill out the application online and you know whether you've gotten the mortgage or not in just a few minutes. But that's still a ways off, not because the technology doesn't exist, but because the regulatory environment won't support that yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So in terms of the benefits, then you just said that it prevents fraud from the consumer side, but it also it helps with efficiencies as well, and it helps the consumer and the client get their services faster as well from you guys. So it's kind of like that win-win situation there. Is there any other benefits that you could see in building out these solutions that you deem is necessary for these financial institutions?
Well, I think one of the things that we're really bad at especially in the mortgage industry and maybe more broadly across financial services is that we have been slow adopters of emerging technologies. And there are some really awesome tools that have been out there for a while, like RPA, robotic process automation, for all the folks that are not technical on the call. Workflow engines on top of RPA is amazing. And when you start to look at the applicability, and so here's what's going on in mortgage right now, Sophia. We have most mortgage companies going underwater on every loan because their cost to produce the loan is so high. The reason it's so high is because for years and years, instead of adapting and adopting technologies, we've thrown bodies at the line. So we've created this manufacturing process that's human labor intensive. RPA in particular would solve a lot of that. Workflows on top of the RPA engine would solve a lot of that. There are people in our industry that argue that blockchain, especially when you think about the title being the root of the whole mortgage process, right? We're transferring the title from one owner to another, or from the builder to the first owner. That title could be locked down in a block. And then you'd have a certain amount of immutability there and change or version control that would save everybody $400 on a title search, right? That makes a lot of sense to me. Why haven't we done it? And again, you go back to the regulatory environment, and you go back to the guys in the title business today go, no, 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 that's how we make all of our money. We don't want to give that up. Another example of that, by the way, because it's not just unique to our mortgage business. I was having conversations with guys at one of the CIO 100 events not too long ago, and they were all working on the driverless car. And I asked one of the guys at one of the big automakers. I said, "So when do you think we'll see that really, go into high volume out on the roads?" He said, "It's not going to be soon, Walt, and the reason is not because the technology doesn't exist. It's because the insurance companies actually have done a great job of lobbying to make sure that each one of us that drives has to buy insurance from them." And if you're not the driver of the car, do you need insurance? And the answer is who pays the insurance company? Well, the insurance companies own almost everything in the United States and probably around the rest of the world. They're not giving up the revenue streams. So, and the manufacturers of the cars then become the people that would buy the insurance, and they're going, we're not paying the insurance companies all that money on your behalf. And so, there's an economic problem here. It's not a technology problem; it's an economic problem. And then, just like in the world of the mortgage, right? We've been able to do a lot of this automatic data gathering on behalf of our customers for years now, not just minutes, but years. And yet, the regulatory environment still requires what they call wet signatures on several documents, right? So I can't just do an automated closing online in a Zoom session. In certain states, I have to actually sit down with you, see you write your name, and then get a notary to notarize that, right? And it's not because DocuSign doesn't work. It's been working great for a long time, right? It's because the regulatory environment hasn't caught up with the technology. So you've got economic factors, you've got regulatory factors, and at the same time, you've got more smart people on the planet than any time in our history working on cool technologies like the stuff we were talking about in the metaverse with spatial and oh man, there's just some really exciting stuff going on right now, and it's going to be a while before those economic systems and those regulatory systems really catch up, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's kind of that mentality. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And and there people are perfectly fine doing things the more traditional ways, and they haven't yet experienced the efficiencies or potentially they're people are apprehensive of being phased out, and that is just something that we're going to have to evolve with as a society. It's really interesting. And I think that's, like you said, it's on all fronts. It's on all technological fronts in every single industry. I think we're experiencing things like this. And, from a consumer or a standpoint, or from your standpoint in the innovation helm, it's an obvious solution. It's an obvious fit for some of these needs here. But it's interesting that it's not just what makes things more efficient or what makes things make sense. There's so many other components that are more like emotionally driven sometimes, and sometimes it is regulatory in terms of they don't understand what to do with all of this data. They don't know how to secure all this data or move and share this data in a way that is compliant. There's a lot of things, especially when we're talking about overseas and complying with GDPR and those types of things, which make it really, really complex and really interesting.
It's funny because a big part of what I did at Homestar, I added in a component, a data fabric that again, data fabric is a fairly new thing for a lot of people, but I was looking for a solution for the California Consumer Privacy Act, which is derivative from that GDPR legislation over in Great Britain, and it has certain elements of requirement, right? The regulatory requirement says not only, well, do you need to know what that data set is, you need to know where the data came from, and you need to know what permissions you have to turn on remarketing specifically for that data set for those consumers, right? And I started looking around, going, okay, I need to get in front of this, because not only will California ask me for this, but very soon New York and Massachusetts. There's certain states that are usually quick followers of things like that. And so Great Britain is normally about 10 years ahead of us in terms of their security regulations and insights. I found a startup at the Atlanta Technology Development Center called PrivOps that was built to be a GDPR solution. And I rolled it out and found out I could do all kinds of cool stuff with that data fabric, not just solve for GDPR or California privacy, but really start to look at what the patent holder on that technology calls the metadNA, right? And I had a quick connect tool that was like SnapLogic or MuleSoft that was built into that. And so I could start to do some really amazing visualization of data using another kind of innovative tool called ThoughtSpot that I think is the best data visualization tool out there. And again, I'm biased, so I just have to say that there are other visualization tools out there that are pretty snazzy as well, but I love ThoughtSpot. When I look at the real raw job of being a CIO, the reason they call it Chief Information Officer is not because they want us to keep all of the stuff on. That's a hygiene thing. Yes, all of the technology needs to work, and it needs to work most of the time, Walt. But what we really need is information. We need information so we can drive this business and make sure that we have sustainability and that we have growth in the right ways. And so how do we take all of this data that we collect, sift through it all, and move up that kind of wisdom tree, if you will, right? It says, I got data, and now I've got information, now I've got knowledge, and now I've got wisdom, right? And now how do I distribute that? And how do I make sure that the right people in the organization have access to all of that stack so they can see where it came from, right? It's not just an assertion of wisdom, it's a validated assertion, right? That says, I know what the roots are. So when you use data fabric tools, when you use visualization tools, what you're really doing is you're adding power to your organization using, those kinds of technologies to really help you drive, right? Because leadership is a vision thing. It's not a management thing or a handling thing. It's a vision thing. I need to see where I'm going, and I need to be able to understand what's going on while I'm going there. I think a lot of companies have a lot of work to do in this area, and that's a different conversation for a different day. But in terms of resilience, in order for all this stuff to work, you really have to put the homework in to understand the prioritization of certain utilities, the prioritization of your stack. You can't. No company has all the money in the world to build a perfect infrastructure. You have to make decisions along the way that say, look, I've only got so many dollars to spend here. How am I going to get the most resilient infrastructure that I can for the least amount of spend, right? And then from an ongoing spend or a maintenance spend, how do I minimize that too? Because I don't really want to be in the infrastructure business, Paul. I want to be in the mortgage business, right? And I want my costs to be low. So again, you start building with the idea of easy to maintain, low cost to staff. I don't need exotic technologies that nobody else has. I don't want to build my own, grow my own kind of thing. I want to buy stuff off the shelf if I can, where there's lots of skill sets, lots of support. And these are the kind of things that you have to factor in as you're building your stack. And then at the edge, you always got that, customer user experience right? Or now we're calling it digital experience, right? So you get into this world of trying to think your way through. All of the technologies have got to come together. They've got to work together, and they've got to, at the end of the day, get to a user that can intuitively, almost intuitively use the tech without a whole lot of extra training burden going into the mix. And so frankly, I probably should stay retired, Sophia, because I'm thinking, as I talk about my job, I'm going, you know what, that's a really hard job. It's not for your everyday lightweight kind of thinker. You really have to be a deep thinker in order to be excellent as a CIO.
Yeah, as I'm sure you are. Um, and speaking on the deployment side of things, what were some of the challenges? What are some of the challenges that you faced? Both like internally deploying these solutions as well as from the client's perspective, the consumer's perspective. Go into that a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you, an interesting story from several years ago. I was at Generation Mortgage, which is a reverse mortgage company. We're the third largest reverse mortgage company in the United States, and we had built for our internal team an application that literally showed a very powerful visualization of how that product actually amortizes over time and how it really benefits the customer. And we got so excited about it once we rolled it out to our sales team as a SharePoint app. We said, this would be so cool if we could sit down with our customers and show it to them in their living rooms. And so we built an iPad app that had some really again, very clean, very intuitive, easy to drive. And long story short, I won CIO of the year off of that rollout here in Georgia. And the financial planners of Florida and Financial Planners Association around the planet got all excited. Said, we've been waiting 25 years for somebody to explain simply and visually how this product works, which we did. But back to your question about deployment, right? So we're rolling this out, and I've got one of my senior guys, that has to go and explain the iPad app to our loan officers, right? Who are mostly older folks. I have to admit, they were mostly older, and this is 12, 13 years ago. And this young man comes into my office after he's delivered the training. He's got steam blowing out of his ears, and he is obviously very emotionally kind of, and he's like, Walt, I'm trying to tell these guys, how to get started on the application with the iPad, right? And I'm like, okay, everybody turn on your iPad, swipe the iPad, right? And they're like, why would we want to steal the iPad? And he's like, no, don't steal the iPad. We gave you the iPad. It's your iPad. What you need to do now is get it to start, right? So, if you know how the Nike swoosh looks, you drop your finger down on the screen and you make that swoosh. Oh, well, why didn't you just say turn on the iPad? The good news is we followed kind of the Apple model or the Google model of keeping it real clean on the app. So once they got into the app, it was fairly easy for them to see how to adjust some sliders and to take some inputs from their customers, make it personable and personalized for each encounter. And again, that app worked really, really well for us. We had great success as a company. We grew like crazy. And again, had a very good exit on that. It was a phenomenal rollout, but it goes to something that back to kind of the conversation about the metaverse, right? You've got some generational challenges out there that we're going to have to continue to solve for. I think a lot of the young people. My kids are all very technology adept, I guess is the right word for that. I'm still not. I'm still learning. I go play in spatial, and I'm trying to set up my avatar, going, "Oh my god," and yet my kids are all like, "Oh, Dad, you just do this." Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, when you're running down the field, I'm going to have to catch up. And so I'm still trying to figure out. And I believe that with some of the tools like the metaverse, like spatial in particular, right? There's an opportunity for us to do something in the hybrid world that we haven't done yet, which, has been create what is essentially office hours, right? So if I go into Spatial and I set up my office, I could post my office hours, and then people could just drop in to Spatial. I won't have to send out a meeting request or a Teams or a Zoom or something like that. A lot of the intentionality of setting up personal meetings, kind of goes away, and it becomes much more informal if we can pull that off. That's a thought. There are probably many other things, and you're probably way down the field on that, Sophia. So help me out. Help an old guy out.
I mean, yeah, I mean that's a whole nother conversation we could get into. Now you're speaking my my language. I mean, yeah, I mean, just on that note, just visualization tools in general help, especially when we're talking about more complex solutions, like what you're talking about, like anything IT or cyber related, cybersecurity, and those types of things, um, to help people understand what is actually happening. Because something that isn't that you can't grasp, especially people that are not in technology, not creating these things, they don't understand how it all works and why it is we need it. But visualization tools can really help with those things as well. Even in the healthcare sector, they're helping to describe to people what is happening in their body when they're diagnosing them. And so people really have an understanding um, of what is happening and what they need to do to combat that, rather than it being some abstract idea of what it is. So but we can definitely play in in immersive technology, and how that we'll have a separate conversation about that, and specifically financial sector
I
as
think this
well.
is an important point, though. I want to really emphasize this for the folks that are paying attention to us. The I figured out many years ago, and I've done a bunch of package software implementations over my career. Some of them global, many of them global, right? With users all over the planet, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different time zones. And one of the things that is universal, though, for all of those cultures and all of those time zones, is that most people are visual. They are not people that can look at a project plan, for instance, or an Excel spreadsheet with rows and columns of information and immediately see what they need to see, right? Whereas when we learned that we could graph that data, and put pie charts and bar charts, and start to visualize the impact of those rows and columns, that made the data actionable. Right now, all of a sudden, I can see which one of those bars is the tallest. That's my best customer. But what about this one down here that's the shortest? What do I need to do there to get them to buy more from me? Right. And so the visualization of the data becomes really important. And so probably around 2006, I found a tool and a process called mind mapping, right? So I started putting everything into these big mind maps, and I would put them on the wall so everybody could see, oh, well, Sophia's got this task and it's due on this date. And oh, by the way, if she doesn't finish, that's going to affect these 13 people up here. And I put their names on the wall so they could all see, Sophia, they're depending on you to get this done by this date. Are you okay with that? Are you still committed? Yeah, you're going to deliver. Oh, yes, ma'am. All right, great. We're excited. But having everything laid out in a visual presentation really engages people. And oh, by the way, they can remember the picture. They can't remember a project plan. They can't remember an Excel spreadsheet for 2 seconds after the meeting, but they can remember that picture they saw on the wall, especially when they have their name in it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And now, especially when you're getting into multiple factors and variables in a 3D context, now you're shifting your perspective, and now you have these multiple perspectives on these subsets of data and how they affect one another. So it's super interesting. How do you see a resilient IT infrastructure playing a role in the broader spectrum of risk management within financial sectors? Like what else can it or will it be used for?
Well, the core that you hinted at just a few minutes ago is that, the real what's going on in the world of
Mhm.
technology and what's going on in the world in general is there is a constant cybersecurity threat, especially against institutions that are involved in financial services. So all of my ports at Homestar were being probed pretty much all day, all long. Looking for weaknesses, looking for openings. The bad guys
Mhm.
are using very sophisticated tools to try to get in, and so that resiliency thing has got to do with not only does it work, right? It has to work, but it also has to be secure. It has to be secure all the time. And if it's not secure all the time, and I don't think anything can be at this point, because you're connected to so many other parts of an ecosystem that are outside your control. How can you, most of the really bad hacks that have happened in the last few years have happened through second, third, or fourth parties that had access and credentials to get into the bigger network that ultimately got exposed. You have to partner. You have to be in the marketplace. So the notion of zero trust is almost funny in a way, because in order to be in business, you've got to trust. You've got to extend trust. So when you start thinking about this notion of cybersecurity as an aspect of resiliency, at Homestar in the last 2 years, we had 3 ransomware attacks that got through multiple layers of our defenses. But fortunately, I had really good defenses that saw that, even though it got through the Outlook filters, it got through, the Azure filters, it got through Darktrace by Antigita, got through Mimecast even, right? All of a sudden, I've got another big set of tools that kick off and see files start to encrypt themselves. So they lock it down, quarantine everything, and then I've got good backups all the time. So I can easily restore back to, a safe point. When you build it right, you build it with cybersecurity in mind up front. And that's something that, again, your average guy building apps in the garage doesn't really think about, right? So if you're using the kids app from the app store or from wherever, right, you got to be mindful that that's also one of the problems with some of these no code, low code, which I love. I love the tools, but I also know that you have to industrialize these apps. You have to have security really at the forefront in that word resilience to me includes that, Sophia. I think you have to include, the cybersecurity protections all the way through. And if you're not doing that, you're just walking through the internet naked, waiting for bad things to happen. It's really not good.
Seriously, and it's easier to address these concerns or these potential threats up front than it is trying to put out fires in the back end, having not thought through that. And that's something that we're, with all these new technologies coming out, the hurdles that we're from a regulatory perspective and a policy perspective that we're trying to tiptoe carefully.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
so so
exactly.
so
That's why so
so
many people are just absolutely beside themselves with regard to, the
yeah.
aging guy, right?
Mhm.
The AI stuff is scary to a lot of people, and it's scary. And based on our conversation, it's scary because it may be a long, long time before the regulators catch up with what the technology is capable of. And if you've got big nation states that are investing in those kinds of technologies to do particularly the deep fakes. We have an ongoing scam that happens every year about the time of the holidays where the scammers try to get my retail people to go out and buy gift cards for our CEO.
I've
This year,
received a text.
this year, they actually had a voicemail that they sent out that sounded like my CEO. It was a deep fake of his voice, but it was still asking them to go buy him gift cards. So they didn't up their game in terms of their ask, but they did up their game in terms of the technology that they used to create that simulation, so to speak. So, everybody's going to have to be on their toes here, for the next, I don't know, for the foreseeable future. I think you have to be on your toes. Tech is at the center of everything, and the bad guys know that, and they're going to try to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and they're using it to build trust with by developing these personal relationships with voices or the, the avatars of people that are seemingly, there's people behind them, rather than just like an email or a website that's representative of a company or a person. It's easier to build that trust, that interpersonal trust with someone that's seemingly a person behind that voice or behind that avatar. So Walt, then looking forward, in your perfect world, what emerging technologies or trends do you believe to have a significant impact on enhancing the resilience of IT infrastructure in the financial services sector in particular? What do you kind of see coming and hoping to incorporate there?
Well, I'm actually net positive on AI. I think, you take some of those tools that we talked about earlier, the RPA, workflow engines, you put that in a neural net that's capable of learning and adjusting over time. As more and more data comes in, it starts to learn, it gets better and better. Some of the AI tools that are backed by what is essentially humans that are doing that cleansing and clearing on, kind of on the fly as it's learning. Trainers that train the trainer, I think is the model there. I get really excited about that because we can take a lot of cost out and get humans back into, that higher, use, not stare and compare and, downloading from one spreadsheet to another, that kind of thing. I think we get the humans who have incredible processors doing things that require those incredible processors and get them more engaged in real value adding activities. A lot of these tools really aid in administration, right? And that's the grunt level stuff that most people hate to do anyway. So let's automate as much of that as we can using what we're calling AI, the neural nets, the ML, get the workflow engines, really driving this stuff through. I'm really bullish on those technologies. I think that's the future that we're going to see, and we're already seeing, what appears to be magic happening with some of these tools. And I love it. I think it's an exciting time. I wish I was, 40 years younger, to be honest with you, because it's just, there's some really cool tools being built right now.
Yeah, well, you're definitely doing a good job at kind of leading the charge in your industry, and for people that are not 40 years younger, that are learning to adopt these technologies and use them in their daily lives. Because just like you said, bringing it back to the beginning, there's technology on its own is no longer a separate siloed industry on its own, and it's really infused in everything that we're doing in our daily lives and in our professions. Yeah, go ahead.
Appreciate that. I want to share just real quickly, and then we can probably, walk away. But I was up in Napa with my wife just a few years ago, and this really great winemaker up there named Henry was explaining something that I had never known before about wine. And I'm married to a lady who is, Sicilian and Irish, and so she drinks wine all the time. And what he said was, when you take wine and you drink wine, one sip after another with no food, the wine loses its power. It loses its jamminess and its punch and its flavor very quickly. And he said this is something that the French and the Spanish and the Italians have known for thousands of years, right? That wine is built to go with food, and food is meant to be complemented by the wine. And they've known that for thousands of years, and that's how that mechanisms comes together. In the conversation we've had today, Sophia, I would say, very similarly, business needs technology and technology needs business, and one without the other is not the same, and neither one of them is really all that it could be without the other, just like the wine and the food. And so when you start putting all this together and you realize they're best when they're merged together, right? And now the technology really does empower and enable that business. And it's that inseparability, I think, that we're going to have to come to grips with. We've got to stop thinking about IT as something separate from the business. It's totally part of what we're doing in the marketplace. And I'll
Yeah,
stop.
100%. Yeah, that's 100% right. And we need to get more people thinking on that route. that there's a set of things that comes with a business plan and business operations, and technology and IT and cybersecurity is definitely part of that, and that will continue to grow in terms of the components and the different types of technologies that continue to get added to the stack. Because I feel the same way in terms of just emerging technology separately. Like each technology on its own is very powerful and useful on its own, but now when we start combining the capabilities, we're talking about holistic solutions that are really addressing the needs of specific professions and specific industry sectors. So thank you so much, Walt, for coming on this podcast with me. It's been a very insightful and conversation, and it's been great learning from you and learning a little bit more about resilience and IT infrastructure, specifically also in the financial sector. So thank you so much.
Pleasure to be with you today, Sophia. I've enjoyed it as well.